Hey Steve, how are you?
Hi, Sue. How's it going?
Good. How are things over in sunny Boston?
Well, today decently actually pretty sunny. It was 45 degrees after being 10 yesterday, so I pretty much just walked around like this all day, which was liberating to say the
Oh my.
least. But yeah, can't wait for spring. Can't wait for spring.
Me too. Me too.
I'm ready.
Okay, so Steve, you are currently the directing food photographer at America's Test Kitchen, which
hmm
also makes content, well, which also is um, part of um, Cook's Country and Cook's
hmm
Illustrated, right? They're all
Yep,
part of the same family.
correct.
And let's start. Can you just give us a little bit of background on where you're from and how you broke into editorial food photography?
Sure. I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C. My mom worked for the National Endowment for the Arts for her entire career before my brother and I came along. So I grew up in a household that was very, you know, conducive to, pursuing the arts, pursuing things like that. She worked in a number of galleries that had like summer camp programs and stuff. So my brother and I were, of course, in these summer camps so she could keep an eye on us. And we did a little bit of everything: ceramics, painting and drawing, all that. One summer she stuck me in the dark room that was there, and everything just, that was it. Everything just sort of clicked after that. I knew I wanted to be in photography somehow. I was working for my high school paper at the time that I kind of figured this out, and I was like, all right, photojournalism, that's it. So I spent a number of years working for a bunch of newspapers around Boston, covering everything from, Patriots and Celtics games to Ted Kennedy's funeral to general assignment to this to that to whatever, a little bit of everything. And then at one point, I was in the studio at the office of the Boston Globe when an editor who had kind of mentored me through when I was an intern there uh, said, "Hey, the design director at the Globe is married to the design director at America's Test Kitchen. They're about to launch an online cooking school and they need a photo editor. Would you want to give maybe doing photo editing a shot? Because it's a little bit of a different, like, you're not out there in the field chasing stuff to make plans. Because if you're working for a newspaper and they call you and say, hey, something's happening, we need a photographer. If you don't take that call, they're not going to wait for you to get out of the shower or whatever. They're just going to call the next person. So it's a hustle." And I was like, in my early 20s, and I was thinking, okay, yeah, I could maybe use a little bit of a slowdown. Um, so this person put my name in for an interview for this photo editor job, and I went in. I'd watched the shows, the TV shows on PBS growing up. I was familiar with the brand and everything, and it was this perfect collision of photography and food, and just really getting deep into recipes and things like that. And I was just sold. Originally they didn't hire me to shoot; they just hired me to, edit other people's photos. And after a while, they were like, "Oh wait, you can actually take pictures, huh? Well, let's get this guy a camera, see what he can do." So that was 10 years ago last month that I started working there.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I know, time flies, right? And since then, I've went from being, basically somebody who is just pushing pixels around all day to being the senior staff photographer and in charge of photography at, Cook's Country and for a number of cookbooks under the America's Test Kitchen brand. It's been a heck of a journey.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
that's a great lead into my next question because I thought that before maybe the way to get to what you actually do would be sort of to talk about what you don't do. In other words, I know that there's a whole team of people and roles that go into producing a beautiful peach snack cake shot, for example. So
Yeah.
maybe
Mhm.
share with us who is involved, beginning with the idea and the planning through the execution of the shoot, and then even afterwards, because I think you've just revealed that you have people that maybe are in charge of the retouching and the editing, and that you don't necessarily do that. So tell us who the
Yes.
team is.
So the team, it's kind of funny. The team ends up being about, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 people, all told, once it's all said and done. So we'll take a look at the, for a given magazine issue. we'll have meetings while things are still in development with the editors, the test cooks who are developing the recipes, with the designers of the magazine, to say, you know, we'll have this big long list of about 25 dishes, and we'll say, all right, start at the top. Peach snack cake, what are we doing? What's the goal? What's the vibe? What are we trying to do here? And we'll talk all that out for, you know, a couple hours on meetings. And then finally, you know, a couple weeks later, we'll actually get to the shoot day. Now what happens then, this is kind of amazing, is we'll have a team of about 3 or 4 people, photo team cooks, working in the test kitchen itself, just cranking out, you know, dish after dish after dish, 2-3 times per dish, just to make sure that we've got, you know, our pick of which, you know, food items actually look the best. So they're doing that. Something gets into the studio. Right now in the studio, it's myself and a food stylist, which is a real job that you can have. And it's stunning because these people are wizards at getting food to behave the way you want it to behave.
Magician.
Absolute, just, I mean, magicians. Yeah, they're sorcerers, to get things to look the way you want them to look. And we can touch on, you know, what they do a little bit later, because there's a lot of gossip and hubbub out there in the world about like, oh, you won't believe what food. It's not that weird. It's not that weird. I mean, depends on what you consider weird, but it's not as bad as you think it is. You can eat the food after the shoot's done, 99% of the time. So we're in collaboration with also the designer of the magazine, who's art directing the shoot. Anywhere from 1 to 3 editors, for the magazine, who are making sure the food is correct as developed. You know, maybe we loop in the recipe developer as well. So that all happens. We shoot. We're in constant communication with them. Back in the day, it would have been, you know, everybody huddles in the studio. Now it all happens over Slack, which is an interesting experience. But so the shoot's wrapped, everything's shipped off. I file everything, you know, in a place on our file server where everything goes. Later on, art directors will go in, make their picks of, you know, if we shoot like 120 images of a recipe, maybe like 8 or 10 of them will be, you know, deemed keepers or selects or worthy of being moved over. And of those, 1 will end up in the magazine. And maybe there will be an alternate that ends up on web. Once those are picked, they'll get sent over to our production department. Speaking of wizards, it's a team of about 4 or 5 people who tune everything up just so that things can run in print. And you're talking about working in different color spaces. Like print is a CMYK process, while, you know, we're generating images that exist mostly in an RGB space. So they've got to get that toned up for things like, oh, what color is the paper that we're printing on? You know, if we need to retune it for web, like, do they handle all the compression? Do we need to make this piece of chicken look a little bit more browned than it actually is? Do we need to get rid of this random little mote of dust in the background? And they'll just go in and make it happen. One of the guys who works on Cook's Country, this guy Dennis Noble, who is awesome, jokes that he has a Photoshop brush. It's like, oh yeah, this is my grill brush. I'll just go in there and make this look a little bit more grilled. Yeah, they've got a great sense of humor. And the thing is, while they can fix pretty much anything, I like to not leave them with too much to do. I think one of the #1 rules for me about studio photography is like, get it in camera, because it's faster and easier to do it while you actually have everything in front of you than to say to somebody else down the road, like, oh, can you fix this in post? A, it makes their lives easier, and B, the production department has the best snacks when we're all in the office. And so I like to think that I would be putting myself in a position where they'd be willing to share.
Of course. I mean, that's very reasonable. Okay, so then let's get back to you. So the dish is cooked, it's plated, it's brought over to your set. And what is your main objective? What are you mostly trying to get right? Is it the lighting? And do you set up everything with maybe some dummies before you actually get the food, right?
Occasionally, yeah. I mean, most of the time. What I'm really trying to get right is mostly the lighting. Just because, you know, there are obviously ways to evoke a certain feeling with what you do with your process in camera. whether it's messing with your aperture or dragging your shutter or things like that. But 95% of food photography is about the lighting. And you can use that to create vibes of, seasonality, of coziness, of time of day, of, sense of all of that. So, over the years, you develop a couple of things where you're like, all right, it's got to be this kind of setup. So I have it, kind of stored in my brain, like, you know, a bunch of different setups. One of, you could do like a winter cabin setup, you could do a summer beach setup, and I kind of have those lighting patterns a little bit memorized. So if somebody's like, all right, I want this to be like a summer evening al fresco dinner in the backyard, I can go in my head and say like, all right, I need undiffused lighting, a little bit of fill to keep the shadows from feeling too, dark or desolate or depressing. It wouldn't kill me to throw, some foliage in between the lighting and the set as a modifier to create the feeling of like, oh, I'm in the backyard and there's trees going on. Um, but yeah, I mean, in terms of using dummies for stuff, that really becomes very important when you're dealing with dishes that have a limited lifespan in terms of looking their best.
Right.
So you're talking about like spaghetti alla carbonara or something like that. Like that sauce is going to lock up because it's just cheese and eggs.
Right.
So once it stops being hot, it just starts to stiffen up. And eventually, at the end of half an hour on set, you could reach a fork down into this bowl and pick up the entire massive pasta just on the fork because it's like cemented together with cheese and egg basically. So you might do a dummy bowl where you just have whatever bowl your stylist has picked out, and you might just throw in like a crumpled up paper towel or something to approximate the way that light's going to fall on the pasta. Crumpled up paper towels come in as a dummy a lot. Like I've made more paper towel sandwiches on set just to have something to stand in that I can count.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a go-to. Every food photographer's got a little bit of a different dummy strategy. Sometimes we'll be, blessed enough to have the photo team say, oh, hey, we churned out one mise en place, one batch of this recipe. So you can have this one to mess around with. And then the next one's going to be the real hero one. So you can have everything dialed in so that when it's ready to go, it's ready to go.
Right. So does a dish ever come to you and you just say, you look through your lens and then or your viewfinder or whatever, or, if you're tethered, you're looking online at your laptop. You ever just say, you know what, this fried chicken, it's too dark. So I'm going to go ahead and eat it. And you guys go ahead and bring me another one.
All the time. All the time. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we were in a situation today where we fell. And this is one of those things where what I do sounds completely ridiculous when you have a rough day at work or whatever, because like everybody has rough days at work, but I'll be talking to friends who are like doctors or lawyers or engineers or something, and they're talking about like, oh, I had a rough day, it's just, I wonder how I can reach these kids, but when you see the light go on in their eyes and you realize that you've made a difference in their lives, it really makes it all worth it. How was your day? And I'll be like, I couldn't get the cupcakes to look good. It's a weird set of problems. But no, so today we were in a breakfast burrito hole for like 3 hours in the morning because the art director had one vision, the food editor had another vision, and somewhere in the middle lay something that looked too much like a Taco Bell ad for everybody to really like it. So we were like pulling back and forth, whatever. And after a while, you look at what you have in the studio and you say, all right, well, the stylists like to say like, all right, this burrito's dead, or this pasta's dead, or this pizza's dead, or whatever. And like your cheese is all that kind of stuff. And so it's like, all right, well, we need the photo team cooks to fire off a new batch. Who wants this burrito? So I had a breakfast burrito for lunch today. It was great.
Nobody volunteers.
I mean, oh yeah, none of us snack on set ever. No.
Okay,
no.
I'm gonna try something here to share my screen and see if we could take a look over here at some of your work.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Let's look at this. I mean, come on. So now this one, I recognize these brownies. Look at this. I mean, everything. I love these bars here. There you are, looking very handsome. But so these are examples of Steve's work here. All right. So I'm going to pop out of that now. And I want to get back to those. Oh, that might not have worked. Okay.
Oh, here we go. Yep, I'm looking at it. Here we
Okay.
are.
Now we're
Oh, the
looking at it.
cupcakes.
Sorry, guys.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah,
Oh, those
I
cupcakes.
love those pigs in blanket.
Those were a lot of fun. I had that shot banked that was my election day, election week kind of thing of like,
I
hey, get
loved
out
the
and vote or
caption.
whatever. Oh, it was, I think I shot that back in August or something. And I was just standing there in the studio and I was like, this is what I got to do. And it sat there in my drafts folder for so long. And every day I was like, ooh, is today the day? And I was like, no, man, November, just keep waiting.
Yeah, that was
my drafts folder is a mess, by the way. It's just like stuff that I can keep going back to if I wanted
I'm
to.
sure. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and go back to our regular screen here. Okay. So are there any foods that just torment you that, you know, a shoot is coming up or a certain food and you just think to yourself, you know, I think I feel sick and I might have to call in sick today. Or or do you really feel like you have such an outstanding team that you don't really have to worry about that because that's sort of their job?
I think that there is, okay, so there are definitely things that are more challenging than others in terms of like, groups of foods. Pasta bakes are really challenging. Like a lasagna is pretty hard because you're trying to preserve at once the meltiness of everything and also the visibility of your layers. And like everything might just fall apart. Everything might just turn into a big goopy mess. Pies are always days where you're going to have to block off like a whole morning to shoot a cherry pie because everybody wants clean slices, and if you know anything if you've ever eaten a pie in your life, that's not how it works. And so there are things that are definitely higher hurdles. But in those moments, it's nice to know that you have a very capable team with you in the studio and with you in the kitchen who are able to pull these things off in a way that makes sense, and B, the people who are writing the recipes are like, they're not going to throw you a wrench for no reason. Like, they believe in this stuff. They're like, okay, the reason why, like, we're putting this cherry pie out there into the world because we think it is the best dang cherry pie that we could come up with. So let's make it work. So I know that they know it works. I know that my team will help make it work. Granted, there's some adjustment that has to happen, but I think that like it comes down to pursuit of a shared vision, Right. And when there are challenges like that, it's like, oh, hey, like a cheese pull and an enchilada is tough or whatever to pull off because people want to see the filling. It's inherently closed off. It's smothered in whatever. But when you do actually get it, and when you say, all right, we did this thing and we actually did it better than we thought we might be able to and faster than we thought we might be able to, there's nothing like that. It's like problem solving. There's a thrill for that, I think.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet one of your stylist, Chef L, right?
Yes.
When
Oh
you
my
were
God.
visiting. And she said, I've heard her say, I am damn good at cheese pulls.
Elle rocks.
Nailed.
She rocks an amazing cheese pull. She's fantastic. Elle and I have this great vibe where like we don't even have to say anything when we're in the studio. Like we look at what's on set, we look at what comes up, and we say like, you gonna do it? Yep, me too. All right. And I'll adjust what I need to adjust, and she adjusts what she needs to adjust. And then just magic happens. She's the best. She's the absolute best. She and I did most of a book of cocktails together, and it was so much fun because her energy is so great too. Like we'd just be throwing limes into drinks from across the room to try to get this perfect splash or whatever. And when we finally would nail it, we would just do an entire lap of the studio, just running around high-fiving people, stuff like that. But stylists do have things that they really specialize in. Like you might meet somebody who it can just throw a linen down on set, like a napkin or a towel or whatever, and it'll just land in a perfectly imperfect, disheveled kind of way that reminds you of being in a French farmhouse or
Mhm.
something. And like, that's their skill. Like Elle rocks an amazing cheese pull, does a beautiful citrus splash. To this day, we used to have this feature in the magazine a while back that was at the back of every issue, there would be some like big showstopper, architectural piece of a cake. Like the Burj Khalifa of desserts, pretty much, these things. And we realized eventually that they were so intimidating that people didn't really want to make them, so we replaced the feature with something else. But it was great because whenever we'd get to the thing, or the day that we'd be shooting the Great American Cake, as it were, Elle and I would just look at each other, and I'd be like, "Man, I don't really like lighting cakes." And she'd be like, I don't really like styling cakes. Let's just do this and get it over with. And like, it would come out and it would look great. And people like, wow, that, cranberry olive oil cake with candied rosemary petals and everything on top. It's in like a December issue. It looks so wintry. It looks so amazing, you guys. And we were like, yeah, we hated every second of that. But we
Exactly.
ate it, and we're happy you're happy.
Yeah, and you'd never know.
Exactly.
Okay, so getting back to the magazine for a minute,
Yes.
one of the things I think that's so neat about America's Test Kitchen is I just always know. I mean, I don't think you really need any other resource to make
Mm.
a perfect dish, because so much research, so much nerding out at every stage of that recipe with every ingredient has been done, that I know it's going to turn out. I'm confident that if I go buy these ingredients and I follow these instructions, this is going to work out. So it's a great resource. But I also know, not but I wonder how it's influenced your own cooking, because you are no slouch in the kitchen. I mean, I've seen your stories, and the other day you made a loaf of bread that was just like
Oh yeah.
beautiful loaf of bread. And then what was that spiraled pastry that you made? You actually
Oh
published
yeah.
the correct foreign spelling of it, and I had no idea what it was.
All right, so that is one of my new favorite things in the world. It's something called a benitza. It's a Bulgarian cheese pastry, basically with like phyllo, Bulgarian feta, which is, technically it's called like a sirena or something like that. Sirena. I'm butchering this. My lady friends from Bulgaria, she would be shocked right now that I am doing such a bad job at pronouncing these things. But it's a filling of feta, yogurt, and eggs. You roll it up in sheets of phyllo brushed with butter. You coil those things up, and then you put them into a spiral into a round pan and bake it for an hour or so at 375. And it souffles a little bit. It rises up. It does this wonderful thing. It's fantastic with another little schlump of yogurt on the side for breakfast with like a cup of coffee or something like that. It's spectacular.
Oh, it looked
Um,
fantastic.
I'm going to send you the recipe when we get off the call, because
Okay.
it's super easy. Everybody should make it.
Okay.
Um, I think that in terms of my own cooking, it's weird because you're surrounded by people all day who are just going into the weeds so deep on the smallest, the most trivial minutia of not just like writing a recipe or why they like a dish, but like the culture behind a dish and the history behind a dish, and like where they first had it and where they've had their latest best version and where you should go to try the latest best version. And so you're steeped in this. I remember when I first started working there, I would, just, I'd cook a little bit. I considered myself somebody who would, who likes to make dinner. I grew up in a household where you cook at home, basically.
Mhm.
But I didn't really realize how much I didn't know.
Mhm.
And especially because my first role there was, editing a body of work that would serve as instructional cooking material at this cooking school for other people. So I got a crash course just in looking at what I was looking at, you know. And since then, you know, I would like walk around the test kitchen with a camera for a number of years and just take pictures of people doing recipe development. If there was some crazy moment, like they were, you know, making puff pastry by hand, or making phyllo by hand is great because you have this like, you know, inch long or inch wide dowel about, you know, yay long, and you're just stretching the sheet of dough across the counter to stretch it like to be that kind of translucent thin. So you absorb stuff, and you know, you find that people have their individual areas of expertise. Like I used to work with a guy who was a fanatical meat curer and occasional illegal Italian cheese importer. One of my best bits of absorption was from a guy who was a fanatical bread baker, to the point where like he teaches classes at he teaches classes at King Arthur on the weekends and stuff. And he gave me a bit of his sourdough starter last December 2019, because I'd always wanted to make sourdough at home and all this kind of stuff, because I felt like a sucker every time I bought a loaf of bread. And he was like, no, man, here, just take this. Here's my formula. Go nuts. So I would like to let the record reflect that I started making sourdough at home before quarantine, before it was cool. So, but, so I'm not just chasing a fad out here. I'm just eating toast. But no, yeah, I think the other cool thing is that like you are talking to people about food and cooking all day, and you have this body of work that you know, work on with the magazine and with the cookbooks and stuff. And for a lot of us, it's like we'll be introduced to a lot of concepts there, but what we end up publishing, because we're so deep in it, that's like a starting point. Like you'll talk to somebody who ran a recipe in Cooks Illustrated for, say, mapo tofu, and you can go to them and say, hey, I want to make your mapo tofu recipe tonight. Is there anything I should do that you would do that didn't end up running in the recipe because it got cut because it was too hard, or you had to like find some ingredient? And they'll say, oh yeah, like go find the actual black bean paste, and there's a Chinatown like 2 miles that way, so that's not too hard. But you can jump off from those recipes, and I think that's one of those things that we really want to do is get people to a place where they are confident in the kitchen and inspired by what we put out there, and inspired by other things that might come in around them, that they could start with one of our recipes and say like, I kind of want to do this, but what if I used pancetta instead of guanciale? Or like, what if I made like a Thai basil pesto, and just like chase that down, you know? So I think that's what it's really about. It's just, yeah.
Awesome. All right. So you're not doing any editing or retouching of your own photos, right?
I do like very, very light things. Like if, so I shoot tethered to Lightroom, and I'll do like minor stuff, like, you know, apply a little bit of extra contrast or a little bit of extra saturation, just because, you know, we shoot raw, just so we have the most robust file format to work with for all the derivative uses down the line. And like raw files, when they come in like right off the camera, look almost, not like almost like black and white, but you know how it is. Like the way it looks in real life is not quite the way that it comes in right off your camera. Like you got to do a little bit of tuning.
Sure.
So I've got a default couple of settings that come in, or that are applied when files come in. But then like, you know, if there's a weird little blotch on a plate or something like that, I'll hop in with a healing brush or a cloning brush or something like that, and just be like, oh, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
The lucky thing is that any spot adjustments like that I do, once these files do get to our production department, they save any adjustments we've done as an individual layer or snapshot within the raw file, and say, all right, here's our reference point. Here's what the photographer wanted this to look like when they looked at it. And then say, all right, these settings are saved over here. We can always revert to them. And then they'll wipe the slate clean, and everything that I did quick and dirty, they'll go in and do like carefully and thoughtfully. Because most of the time when I do something to a photo on set, it's to try to alleviate any concerns that an art director or a food editor might have. They'll be like, hey, does that look a little bit dark? And so I'll just like do a local adjustment, drag the shadows up a little bit and say like, hey, it can be done in post. Don't worry about it.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it's mostly a guideline for the folks who actually come in and do it way better than I know how to do. Like
Gotcha.
I cracked open Photoshop to do some adjustments on some film scans I got back the other week. And I've spent so much time in Lightroom in the past year that I got into Photoshop and I had to like stop and say, how do I do everything again? Hold on.
Yeah.
Have I forgotten how to use Photoshop? But
Yeah,
yeah.
I myself am just learning Photoshop. I do want to say for the record that I also really love the style and the composition of the shots that you guys do. You know, there's no
Thank you.
cuteness going on. It's really about the food. There's not like a ton of props. The colors are wonderful. We saw a picture of those brownies that look like muffins, and those actually are based on something from Portland,
Yeah.
at Loretta Jean's Pies. And
Oh,
you guys came out for a visit and we went there and I think you shot a bunch of pies, but then the recipe that ended up getting published in the magazine was for those ganache filled brownies. So I went ahead and made them. They turned out perfectly, but
oh.
I was in Lightroom for like an hour trying to get the color of the chocolate right. And now I'm still pretty much a beginner photographer, right?
Mhm.
And I finally, I got to the point and this happens to me all the time, where I just go colorblind. I can't see colors anymore. So I got my phone, I brought up your picture and I held it to my screen. And it was shocking how different the colors. I mean, part of the problem was I had them in a red wrapper and I was trying to
Oh
desaturate some
yeah.
of the red. And when I did that to make it look more dark brown, the wrappers looked strangely horrible. So anyway, I love the style. I love, I don't know, how you guys come up with your aesthetic, but I just think it's for my taste, it's so perfect.
Thank you. It's really a group effort.
Yeah.
Everybody contributes something. I don't think any one person owns the entire aesthetic. Like, I might have the light and the, more camera and like stage tech things locked down on my end, but like that also, you could trace that back to the stylist. You could trace that down to the art director's propping decisions. You could trace that down to, somebody saying like, you know what, I want cross-cut scallions instead of bias cut scallions. It's such a group effort, but like, yeah, what's fun is watching the aesthetic change over the years. I mean, things were very, very, very different back when I started out, before they let me touch the magazines. I'm not saying that anything was cutesy, because nothing really was. But we would shoot a lot of things on like patterned tissue paper with very, very, very soft focus and backgrounds that extended out into infinity. I think that the biggest thing that drives us now is that everything has to kind of make sense. Like, where is this happening? When is this happening? Who's there? Who's at this meal? Who's eating these cupcakes? When are we bringing these cupcakes out? Are they after dinner? Are they this? Are they that? Which I think sort of precludes a lot of the cutesier kind of things. Like one of the things that kind of that I see a lot, that it's like a very mid-aughts, late-aughts, like food blog kind of move, is like if you've got a blueberry pie or something like that, or some baked good with a fruit that has since been transformed into, pie filling or jam or something like that, and there'll be like a big pile of raw blueberries next to a slice of blueberry pie on a cutting board outside the thing. And I'm like, wait, you're taking the whole pie out of the pie plate to slice it and then putting a bunch of raw blueberries also on the cutting board while you're slicing the pie?
Why?
Who are you? What is this? Yeah. So like things have to make sense.
Yeah.
And I
The
think
raw
that contributes a lot.
blueberries are cooked, okay?
Oh, and you're gonna spend your whole time just like trying to dodge your knife around this pile of berries that are round and are going to roll off of your cutting board. Yeah. So things have to make sense.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about travel because
Yes.
pre-COVID, I know that your job afforded you the opportunity to go a lot of neat places. And one of the things I absolutely love about Cook's Country, and I still buy the paper magazine because I love to
Huh.
read those stories, about, I mean, you had a fantastic story about some hole in the wall underground, like behind an alley pierogi place in Ohio, I think you told me about.
Oh man.
Where do you get to travel? Where have you been that you would really want to go back? And what's coming up when things go back to normal?
So I travel a lot with, or I travel a lot. Cook's Country executive food editor Brian Roof and I have been going around this nation of ours for the past 5 or 6 years. 6 years. We've been doing it for 5 years. We took 2020 off because this whole thing happened, and I don't know what it was all about. But yeah, we've been on, by my calculation, 26 different excursions around the country, everywhere from South Carolina to Pittsburgh to Portland to El Paso to Chicago to Detroit to Lafayette, Louisiana to everywhere. Basically what we'll do is we'll throw out a list of destinations at the beginning of a year and say, all right, we got to narrow this down to like 5 or something. We'll line up a whole bunch of interviews, restaurant visits, we'll go cook in people's homes, to really try to document the sense of like what a given city's culinary scene is really all about, and not just what's going on in restaurants, but like what informs what's going on in people's homes. Like for instance, take the Rust Belt as a whole. I mean, you go to some place like Pittsburgh, and there's like a very strong Eastern European influence, because there's a very large Eastern European population, children of immigrants themselves. And so, you could get a pierogi out somewhere. You could get a sausage sandwich out somewhere, but like, why not go to someone's house? Because this is the food that people are making. Because
Yes.
you can go out to eat whatever in pretty much any large American city, but if you want to get the sense of what means something to that place, like you go to Rankin, Pennsylvania, and have a fried fish sandwich on a Friday in Lent at Emil's Lounge, which is this great dive bar hangout right up the street from this steel furnace that was around when the steel companies were still running that entire town. Because it's this fixture of the community. Or you'll go to Elaine Kitlowski's house and make pierogies with her and her 2 sisters, and like her college age son will come through once the pierogies are done because he knows it's lunchtime. And I'm like, been there, know that. But no, it's a really cool way to get to see the country. We try to set aside time to chase down any leads that we might find. If we've been somewhere for like 4 days, like we'll leave Sunday open to say like, hey, we'll talk to people when we're out, checking into the hotel or out at dinner or whatever, because people always want to tell us where to go to eat or
Exactly.
what we should see. So we'll go check that out. And if we have extra time, maybe we'll go see the St. Louis Arch. Maybe we'll go to White Sands out in New Mexico and just be in this weird desert, because like you're there, you're in the moment. Why not? Take it in. Get
So
a
you have
sense
a
of the
great
place.
job,
It's not bad, Sue. It's
right?
not bad. It's
Well,
it's pretty amazing.
tell me about, though, just for your own, personal development, or what do you do? What are you working on for personal projects, if any, or what do you like to do in your free time? I see there was a cat around there.
Oh yeah.
I want to know
She's
if your cat eats butter and cream cheese. Mine does.
it's oh my God. I can't get her to care about people food. I don't know what it is.
Hmm.
She's happy to do her own thing. Yeah, it's weird. Although I will say that I'll one of my biggest one of my favorite kind of food groups is Portuguese food, and they trade very heavily in like tin fish. So like you'll buy, a like a smoked cod fillet in olive oil, and I'll say, all right, man, this is a snack. This is great.
Hmm.
Have it with a glass of wine. I'll crack the can open and she'll just be like, okay, now I care. Now this is
I
happening.
selfish.
Exactly. And I'm like, no.
Nope.
Do you know what I had to do to get this can?
Yeah,
Forget it.
exactly.
No, I mean, in free time wise, I mean, I take a lot of pictures. No, so what do? I play guitar, I ride my bike, I go on hikes, I spend a lot of time in vintage stores, looking for anything from, cool coffee making devices to old records. Um, Catch up on a lot of movies just because, I worked with a guy once who is now over at Serious Eats, and he asked me once if I had seen this particular film. And I said, "Oh, I missed it." He's like, "Wait, it's by the same director who did this," and I was like, "Oh, I missed that too." And he was like, "Dude, it's your job to like be up on media and consume things, right?" So I went and I binged all of this guy's stuff over the next week, and I was like, "Oh, wait, I actually think this could inform something, in my own personal artistic decisions." It was Denis Villeneuve, by the way. So that was Sicario and Arrival, Blade Runner 2049. Beautiful films. But no, I mean, I am lucky to live in a city with a bunch of great museums. I could spend an entire day at the Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston, just strolling around. They have a Basquiat retrospective on right now. I'm going this weekend. I've been excited about it for a year because they've been kicking it back and kicking it back. But yeah, just kind of generally exploring stuff,
Awesome.
more or less. Yeah.
And I
And cooking a
noticed
lot.
when I was looking through your Instagram feed, I saw at one point you had, taken a lot of backdrops and backgrounds and, lights and other things. And it seemed that you were running the studio out of your living space. Is that right? For a little while?
Yeah. Oh my God. That
Does that
was
mean you were cooking too? Cooking the stuff?
mhm.
Wow.
It was an amazing experience. And by amazing I mean um one of the most difficult things I've ever done, but the leftovers are pretty great.
Right.
So pretty much right when we got sent home from work, about a year ago now. So that was what, March 12th, I think, was our first day out of office. It became clear that we weren't going to be back in the studio anytime soon, which is terrible because our studio is really tricked out. I mean, we moved into a new space like 3 years ago, and they said, we used to shoot in a studio that was roughly the size of this room behind me right here, not that big. And so we didn't have that much gear. We could only support one shoot at once, blah, blah, blah. We move into a new space. They're like, well, use it, fill it with gear. So we have a photo studio Disney World in there, whole walls of props, light modifiers, lens, like everything.
I love it when you
So,
show behind the scenes there. I'm just like,
uh, it's crazy, right? I just showed a new freelance partner around there the other day, and I love those moments because people's eyes light up and just go, "Oh my God!" And I can use any and all of this. I'm like, "Yeah, knock yourself out. Give me a call if anything happens." So all of a sudden we're without that, and I'm sitting there on the couch, on a Zoom call with the rest of my team, and I'm mostly wanting to A, not be bored to death, and B, like keep the projects moving. I mean, come on, like what are we supposed to stop everything all of a sudden? No, this stuff's still got to get made, but how are we going to do it? So I said to the team, like, all right, look, could we get special dispensation so that we could go in to the office, each of us spaced 6 hours apart because we were all, it was early days, we didn't know anything, and basically have a supermarket sweep style thing where you go in, grab whatever lighting gear, camera gear, stands, clamps, fill cards, props, kitchen equipment you might need in order to run a studio out of your house or apartment for the next X amount of time. I will get in touch with our kitchen operations team. I will take deliveries at my apartment. I will cook everything myself. I will style everything myself. I will shoot everything myself. I will try to pawn the leftovers off on other people by dropping it off on their front porch and waving at them from 6 feet away. But yeah, it's like stuff had to get done and I just wanted to do it. So my apartment basically turned into a full service food photography studio for about 3 or 4 months, um, which was thrilling because I got a real crash course in how to do all of this stuff myself. And I would like call up stylists I knew to say like, all right, I got this cheesecake and it's breaking. What what do I do? Help me, please. But you know, by the end of it, and this is another cool thing was like, you know, so I'd wrap at the end of the day. I'd have, you know, I'd break down the studio. I'd do all the dishes, which is one part they really don't tell you about. There's a lot of dishes. And I'd say like, all right, that's a wrap. Thanks everybody. Now who wants braised chicken thighs with red peppers or whatever? And most people would just say like, haha, yeah. And I'm like, no, seriously, somebody take these away from me. I don't have any more room in my fridge. I took a wholesale delivery the other day of, you know, pepperoncini and I needed a quarter cup and they sent me a gallon because it was a restaurant wholesaler. I got a gallon of pickled peppers in my fridge. Please save me from myself. And one of the only people who actually said like, actually, yeah, I will definitely take some leftovers was, God bless him, my traveling buddy, Brian Roof,
Ah, yes.
uh, who was just like, hey man, I got, you know, 3 kids and I don't feel like cooking because I'm cooking for work. So I'll take whatever it is he got. And I went over the first time. He lives a couple towns over. So I drove over with gloves on and 2 masks on and everything. And, you know, I'm like, hey, I'm here. He's like, drop it on the front porch and come around back. I'm like, all right. So I dropped like 2 big paper grocery bags of leftovers on the porch. He sends his kids down to get them. I go around the back and he's back there with a standing there with a glass of wine and another glass of wine situated 10 feet away on a stump. And he's like, good to see you, bud. Let's do this. So it was a nice way to kind of still keep in touch with people. But yeah, no, the whole process taught me a lot about food styling and production cooking. And, you know, luckily at that point, I've been able to sponge off some of this knowledge just by, you know, being around these people. But
Exactly.
I have never been, we got back into the studio finally in July. We've been operating on a, you know, very limited cohort system where I'm basically with the same squad of, you know, 6 people on site. We're getting tested twice a week and just kind of going in, doing the thing, getting out, everybody stay safe. Let's do this. I've never been so happy to have people back. I've never been so happy to like, you know, be with these folks who do what they do so well rather than just like trying to hack it myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, teamwork makes a lot of things easier because you know, I couldn't fit any more cheesecake in my freezer. I'm not
Yeah.
kidding. I had 4 cheesecakes in my freezer at one point.
Wow. Well,
I
wonderful.
was just pawning them off.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear that you have such gratitude for, I mean, I'm sure you did before, but it's probably true for all of us that, you know, getting back in touch with people and seeing people that we haven't seen or, you know, that we may have even just a little bit taken for granted, really grows our gratitude, which is a positive thing.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay,
Teamwork
so
makes the dream work, you know?
kind of tying up here, our students are amazing chefs and
Mm,
they want to learn how to take better food photos, starting out with their phone.
mhm,
So we're throwing an absolute ton of information at them, everything from just photography basics, like what do these terms mean, to, you know, what is good lighting, and you know, why shouldn't you wear orange when you're taking pictures of something, and why should you bring your food into a room that has yellow walls, you know, and why should you
mhm,
turn off the, anyway, to composition, to learning how to actually take the photo, meaning like, what does this setting do and what does that do and what is white balance, and to editing, to then now the business of food photography. What could I
mm,
do if I had good food photography skills? You know, what's the crossover? What are some careers I might be interested in? So let's assume that, you know, our average student is maybe someone like I used to be, where I'd cook some spaghetti and meatballs for dinner, and the photo shoot would consist of me putting it on my dining room table with the yellow light on and
Oh
just
yeah.
snapping a picture with the shadow of my arm over the plate of spaghetti. And then maybe applying a very heavy vignette and a pre-made filter. What are some top tips just that roll off your head, if any, about how to improve your food photography?
Sure. I think in terms of top tips to help you kind of get your footing and improve your food photography. Um, I think the number one thing that people don't consider when they're taking pictures of their food is where their light is coming from, what their light source is. Um, if I had $1 for every time I was with somebody and they were standing over a, you know, table full of food with their phone and the window in the room is behind them and they're just standing in their own light and they're like, I don't know why this is. And I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
The cool thing about phone cameras is that they're incredible cameras. People talk down on phone cameras a lot because they're like, oh, I just took this with my phone, not some big fancy thing. I'm like, that camera's incredible and it's in your pocket. Do not take it for granted. Also, you know how it's going to look right off the bat because like you pull it up and oh, hey, there it is. My advice preliminarily would be to like, don't just look at it and say like, oh, here's my spaghetti. Like if you can stand up and move around it, stand up and move around it. Find the place where you can stand, where the light is hitting the food in the best way to make it look the most appetizing. And you'll know because you'll start wanting to eat it just by looking at whatever's on your phone. And it's the same thing for finding your angle too. Just like, if you want to take a great photo of a sandwich, do you want to go top down? Not really, because the top down view of a sandwich is a piece of bread.
Right.
Like that's nothing. Thinking about how you experience a particular food, like what is the way that you can make a sandwich look the most heroic? It's a side view. You want to come down, you want to make it look like a superhero. If you've got some like beautiful scattered kind of like salad or pizza topping or something like that, it's graphic from up top. Just move around it, find what makes you hungry. And when you are at your hungriest and you can't bear to look at the screen anymore, then stop. That's your spot. That's what you want to do. And honestly, in this day and age, I don't think people will judge you for wanting to like take 2 seconds and find your angle. It's 2021. We're all taking pictures of our food. You're fine.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That is great advice. I love it. So keep snapping until you absolutely have to take a bite, and then you know that you're in the right place.
Exactly. There's an amazing food photographer by the name of Andrew Scribani who shoots for the New York Times, who just came out with a book called That Photo Makes Me Hungry. And I'm like, that's it. That's all you, that's what you're after. That's the one. Do
Now,
that.
yeah, Andrew started out not as a photographer. I mean, I've seen some of his classes on maybe Skillshare or something like that, or I think it's Skillshare, but anyway, I love how he shared his journey and how he got started too, which was almost accidental, I think. So, okay,
Yeah.
well, Steve, I've enjoyed talking to you so much. I really appreciate you coming out to give us your wisdom and experience. And thank you for joining us again.
Any old time, always glad to talk shop.
Okay, have a great
Awesome.
night.
Cheers. You too. So great.